Welcome to Donna's World. Hello everyone, welcome to Donna's World. Thank God it's Friday. This week I'm departing from my normal format and interviewing a friend, an Anglo-German woman about town, a woman of substance, and a very, very talented artist. So, Polly.
Donna.
The reason I've invited you here is because I've always been intrigued by foreign women, particularly white ones, who marry Nigerian men. My mother used to say when we were young that Nigerian men were such bad husbands that the only people who should marry them were women who were unfortunate enough to be born Nigerian. So she couldn't understand why you guys who had choices elsewhere came here to marry the men. So tell me, why?
Oof, gosh, easy to say why. Because he was lovely. He was British Nigerian. Whether that's why he was lovely, I don't know. But he
Trust
was.
me, no.
He was a lovely man, and he persuaded me to move out to Nigeria with him, and I never regretted it.
Well, I mean, I'm really happy to hear that because despite my disparaging comments, I do have a lot of Nigerian male friends, and I'd like to think that some of them are, worth very good husbands to the women who've wound up with them. So, tell me, did you find that his behavior in the UK was different? Because that's one of the things a lot of the foreign wives say, is that when they get here, the man's behavior changes to reflect the culture, which is more chauvinistic, more traditional, more misogynistic, if you like.
Did his behavior change? Yes, of course it did. But I think all of our behavior will change in different settings and different circumstances. He was lovely in the UK, he was lovely here, but yes, of course, his behavior changed subconsciously because it is a chauvinistic society. So yes, I wouldn't say that.
I mean, what year was that?
Oh, I moved out here in 1989.
In 1989. And so that's not too far away because there are women who married Nigerian men in the 50s and 60s and even 40s.
Yeah.
So I guess 89 is the modern era.
Yes and no, Donny. Remember when I moved here, I moved from West London to Oyo State, to Ibadan, right? It wasn't Lagos, it was Ibadan. We had no phones. The internet was in your dreams, and we had no phones. So the only way to call back to Europe was Nitel, near Baggy Market. And that's where I went once a week to try and reconnect with home. So I wouldn't say it was quite the era we're in now, but no, of course, it wasn't the 50s. It was the in-between house.
Well, I think I ought to say at this stage, because I didn't introduce you properly, is that your dear husband actually passed away. Which year did he pass away in?
2009.
2009. Okay. So you came in 89 and you lived here for quite a few years with this man you say was lovely. Tell us a little bit about whether you faced any racial discrimination, because there's a widespread belief that only white people can be racist. I've lived in the UK and I've mixed with people of both races. I married an Englishman myself, and I think black people can be racist too. What do you think?
Oh, completely agree with you. For a while, I used to have a home in South Africa, so I know all too well that racism, xenophobia, not just about the color of your skin. It's beyond that. It's more than that. It's more abstruse than that. Have I experienced racism here? There were reactions to me being white in certain circumstances, especially if I dial back to 1989, Oyo State. I very quickly started working in communities, rural communities. And back in those days, a lot of people in rural communities were still scared of white people. So like, or children were. So you'd go into a village somewhere and kids would run away screaming. Now you don't have that anymore. Is that racism? No, but like this weird looking white person has just pitched up and they've heard all these horror stories about white people. I have to say that doesn't happen anymore anywhere I go in Nigeria. And quite the opposite. I'm always absolutely amazed by the situations I find myself in, because as you know, I work in quite far-flung locations across the country.
Well, tell my viewers what you do.
Oh, gosh. Okay, what do I do? As you said, I'm an artist. Struggle with that label somehow. But I do love painting and I create. And when I first arrived here in 1989, it was a bit of a big shift for me. And I had to really reevaluate the impact of everything I did, everything I was doing. So I had to really reassess my approach, and very early on realized that if I'm here as somebody with certain privileges, just by mere dint of being the only white person in the room, right? And I have a certain skill or a certain craft that I use it for good and use it for impact. And so that's kind of developed in my own artistic practice, but I also have an NGO that I co-founded and I now am CEO of, called Five Carers Arts Education Initiative. And we work across the country, but a lot in the northwest of the country in very, very remote, underserved communities where we work with women, giving them arts and creative skills to educate their communities in a very, very broad sense.
Okay, so you come from a European Christian background and you married a man from a southern Nigerian Christian background.
Mm-hmm.
What took you to the Northwest, which is a largely Muslim zone? I mean, if in some ways you could divide this country into two, and it's like two different countries. Well, actually, it's probably like 10 different countries. But the most marked difference is between the North and the South, the Muslims and the Christians, not necessarily in a bad way. But what made you choose a part of the country that you were not brought to?
Oh gosh, you make it sound like my life is so planned and organized and that all of this was planned. Wasn't planned at all. Let me dial back to 1989 when I first arrived in Nigeria, and I was somewhat there were some things I struggled with, right? And so I knew that I needed an escape route. And this illustrates how different a country it now is. I met this beautiful young Australian woman who was married to a northerner, and their home was in Kaduna. And we used to drive from Ibadan on a Friday afternoon up to Kaduna to spend the weekends with them in
That's
Kaduna.
you and your husband?
Yeah.
Okay.
We used to drive up there. My Australian friend's husband was a passionate polo player. I would spend the weekends riding on a friend's, well, the same friend had a farm where he had a pottery, so I used to go and spend time on the pottery, working with the potters. And then we used to drive back to Ibadan on Monday and carry on with our lives. So my escape route, where I used to go and relax and have fun and get creative as well, was Kaduna. So I started feeling very comfortable not quite far north, but in the northern space. And then just over the years, I think partly because my late husband was a passionate polo player, and so not that he spent his whole life on the polo circuit, but, popping up to Kaduna, Kano for the polo was a regular thing. And then why we now developed a focus on Kano was during the COVID pandemic. In partnership with UNICEF, we were asked to focus on a couple of very out-of-way communities in Kano State, and it's kind of grown from there. Yeah.
Well, can I dial back to my original focus? Because your career as an artist is very interesting, but it's almost a diversion in the sense that what I really wanted to get from you was what it was like to be a foreigner here, did you face hostility? You said not really, that children were initially shocked and maybe frightened to see you, but that no longer happens. Did you face hostility from adults?
No,
Okay.
not at all. Maybe something about being in Ibadan and not in Lagos, where I would have immediately been seen as a foreigner stroke expatriate. Generally speaking, a white woman in Ibadan in those days, you were a Niger wife, right?
Okay, I was going to ask you
yeah.
about that.
So I think, yeah, so I didn't sense that then at all.
Well, that's good.
What I was going to say earlier,
Mm.
which maybe we go back to a bit later or another time, is that I start feeling resentment now. And would I call it racism? No, but pushback from various quarters about being white. I feel it now. I never used to. So
what is it? Is it political? Is it personal?
It's around oof, what do I call it? A bit of tribalism creeping in, or caution about letting me into certain spaces because I'm white, or rather, it's an easy excuse perhaps. And I never used to have that, and it's
That's surprising.
into the narrative. But I think, Donu, it's a little bit of see what's happening in the rest of the world, and let's appropriate that as well, because it can be a quite easy tool to keep somebody out of the space. Right?
Is it xenophobia?
No. No.
So, well, the thing is, I'm puzzled because I just thought it would be easier now than it was 20, 30 years ago. But let's hold that thought.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about being a Niger wife. Niger Wives, as my viewers probably don't know, is an organization for foreign wives from all over the world. Some of them are black from the Caribbean, some of them are Eastern European, some are Chinese,
other African countries,
Indian, other African countries, and of course, white. Probably the largest contingent are the Irish, or used to be. So, did you join this organization? How did you find the other women were coping? Because I think you seem remarkably well adjusted. It may be because your own husband was an unusually nice man, okay? And he was a sophisticated man. He played polo. He was a man of the world. Some of the Nigerian men who brought foreign wives back were perhaps more sort of like less, what's the word, cosmopolitan. So how did you find that the other women were?
You also asked me if I joined the organization. No. After my first couple of encounters with the organization, now this was 1989 in Oyo State. I have no doubt. In fact, I know it has changed a lot since then.
Right.
But, I was pretty young and I was introduced to these women, and I think I was still naive, extremely happy with my space and my life. And to come up against a group of women who were very
unhappy.
And one horror story after another. In fact, in those early days, I'm trying to think now, I can't think of a single happy Niger wife I met at those first meetings.
Well, that was my mother's experience. That was why she made that early comment in the 1950s or 60s. And that was my experience growing up, is that all the friends who had white mothers, their mothers were miserable.
Absolutely, and absolute horror stories. Now you say.
No, I lie. There were one or two who probably weren't totally miserable. Just to sort of draw, but generally.
So you say that, maybe they weren't the most sophisticated bunch of husbands. Now, so this is a thing, and back to your point that the husbands, when these women married them in the UK, they came back to Nigeria and became whole other beings. That was happening a lot. So they were men of the world. They were able to be super cosmopolitan and sophisticated, whilst in Europe or in the US, bring them back here. It's a different being entirely.
So where did the pressure come from? Did the pressure come from the society and the culture on them to be more traditional, which brought them into conflict with wives they had met in settings that were not traditional?
I'm not sure.
I should say traditionally African.
Yeah, there must have been an element of that, but I think I felt it was by dint of circumstance and being able to behave like that. I didn't. Was it broader than them themselves as a person? Maybe sometimes, but
I mean,
still pretty inexcusable behavior.
you have to draw a line between the normal conflicts in marriages between men and women of any race, even when they're from the same race or tribe or whatever, and conflicts that are caused specifically by racial differences or by a woman being transplanted from her country to another country.
Yeah.
So, that's what I'm trying to identify, I mean, lots of people have lousy marriages. But some of these marriages were bad only because of that reason.
And using that to control the wife, right? I mean, as you said, my mum, who's German, married my very British dad in the early 60s, right? When there was still the UK and Germany weren't the best of friends. And my mum has always struggled with adapting to British culture, which is why she doesn't live there anymore. So there's always this complex if you marry out of your culture. But goodness me, the world would be a sterile place if we all stayed our lane, so to speak. I didn't cross over into different cultures. I mean, I'm a great believer in the beauty of different cultures coming together and not clashing, but being a catalyst for something wonderful and new. But it was, I think, for me, the shock and the thing I struggled with was seeing these guys really controlling their wives through it, just because, not letting their wives, and these would be men from quite wealthy families, denying their wives basic things just so that they understood that you've married into this culture and this is how we do things. And, horrific stories like not letting the wives have a fridge or, not letting them cutting off the electricity. You've got to stop being one of us. Like, seriously, like you're actually coming
That's
from a
just
very
sadism.
family. And then, when they have children, then imposing that on the children as well. And these are some mixed race children who've got a European or a mom from outside. It's like, why make your children suffer in that way unnecessarily? I mean, if you're not wealthy, if you don't have certain privileges, fine, you make the best of your lot, but don't use it as a tool to control. And I don't believe that the cultures of Nigeria are just about that. There's so many things to celebrate and to find glorious about the cultures of Nigeria. So why bring out all those tools because it's your wife?
What yeah. And what about the womanizing? This is something we frequently heard complaints about. I must say that it affected me. I wound up marrying an Englishman, and even though we're not together anymore, it's not because of philandering. He wasn't a womanizer. I actually grew up believing that Nigerian men were chronic womanizers. Not all of them, but that the chances are you would wind up with a womanizer if you married a Nigerian man because of all these expatriate women and telling their tales of woe.
Well, yes, and not all Nigerian men. Well, fair number of them. And at the Niger Wives meetings, that wasn't discussed because that is your baseline. You have married men who are womanizers. It's a given. So there's almost no point going there because we all know that they're all doing it. So kind of almost no point complaining about that. But actually, you better complain about you don't know where your passport is. You've had children.
Yes.
You don't know where your children's passports are. That kind of thing. Those were real stories to really worry about.
Yes, there was a lot of talk about passports being seized and women being controlled in a way that, would have been inconceivable in Europe. But the thing is, did you find that most of them tolerated it and continued in the marriages and perhaps are now in stable relationships? Or did many of them leave?
Gosh, I don't know what happened to all of them, Dominic. But I think I kept away because, especially then when I became a widow and I saw the other Niger widows, actually some of them quite happy, but like some of those Niger wives became very, very miserable and very, very bitter. And I never wanted to become like that. So I kind of kept away. Did those women that I encountered at those first Niger Wives meeting, did they kind of settle into a rhythm? Did they accept? I kind of somehow doubt that they became happy within those marriages.
Right.
I somehow doubt, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know what happened. I kind of kept away.
Okay.
I kind of tend to do that. If something's not happy and feels a bit toxic, I would kind of keep away.
So you didn't join Niger Wives, and even after your husband died, you stayed.
Yes.
Interesting.
I stayed. I mean, again, I'll go back to you sound like it was planned this way. Kind of wasn't really planned that way. There were some clear things that I needed to not do and some obvious things that needed to happen. And Nigeria being what it is, we tend to become up people. We lose people. God, I hate that expression that you've lost somebody. Yeah, you lost them, you know where they've gone to. But even quite young, we had lost too many friends. And prior to my husband's death, I had two particular friends whose husbands had died very, very young. And I had watched how they had processed, how they had handled their personal matters, their family, and where they would be with their children.
I mean, let me just hold that thought. The family, it's very big here. In Nigeria, even today, people are rarely allowed to see themselves purely as members of one unit, a nuclear family. That is a man, his wife, and his children. The extended family is a major issue here. Was that a problem for you while you were married or afterwards? Did your husband's family interfere in a way that a European family would not have interfered?
Oof. Yes, of course. But I think very early on in our marriage, my husband realized that he better protect our units. My husband was very, very fond of his family. And I think he realized very early on that, especially me being my particular kind of character, that he had to manage the situation. And so he was a brilliant family man in terms of our nuclear family. He was hands-on with our kids. He was fully attentive to us the whole time. So there was no reason for me to feel resentment or feel that, oh, you're spending too much time with the larger, broader family. Now, of course, when he died, those protective layers fell away. And so, yes, it was then somewhat of a different story. And because he protected us so much that it was a bit of a
shock.
Hang on a minute. It wasn't like this 2 weeks ago. What are we talking about? So, yeah, adjustments. Those cogs shift and you adjust and you adjust. But, Donna, being a widow, your husband dying young in this country, challenges and extraordinary hurdles, unimaginable hurdles. But at the same time, part of why I'm still here, actually, let's not put it all down to Polly being so wonderfully responsible. Partly why I'm here is the wonderful support you can get and you do have here. When my husband died, we also had a home in South Africa. And I always say this, that I'm so grateful that when he died, I had my incredible circle of friends here and my friends in South Africa who just surrounded me with love and kept the show on the road and supported my children, supported us as a family, and kept us going. A couple of years after my husband's death, I realized I had to get my kids to the UK and into the UK school system. And I pitched up in the UK. I'm not sure to date whether that was the right move. I don't think my children have ever really forgiven me for doing that to them. But then I moved back to UK with the children, albeit I didn't last very long there. But, I was expecting this is where I'm from. I'm going to be surrounded by love here as well. Not a bit of it. Not a bit of it. No support on that level there. at all.
Why had you grown apart from your English friends that you grew up with?
No, I
Or
don't
they
think
just
so,
have a
no.
different attitude?
Different attitude. It's like, what's the problem, Polly? Can't you look after? I mean, come on, what's wrong with you? Get up and deal with it. You know, in the UK, you have to do everything yourself. There's none of that. Let me do that for you. Let me cook food for you and your children. I mean, it didn't happen there at all. But the support and love that I found here kept me going. And yes, of course, it's
And brought you back.
And brought me back. And my friends, my good friends, laugh a lot at me because, of course, once in a while, I say, I can't deal with this anymore. And off you go. And then a few weeks later, you creep back, and it's like, here we are again. So yes, I'm still here.
Okay, Polly, that was fascinating. Thank you for coming, taking the time to come and share your views and your life story with us. I hope the viewers enjoyed it as much as I did. And I'm going to talk to you in a separate little cameo about weight loss, which is my current obsession. So that's all for now. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.